Welcome to the Texas Talks podcast. I'm your host, Brad Swale. Today, I'm joined by former high school history teacher and the current Superintendent of Public Instruction for the state of Oklahoma, Ryan Walters. Mr. Walters, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you for having me on.
I appreciate you coming on. It's not every day that I get to talk to someone from Oklahoma, and I know that there's beef between Texas and Oklahoma. I get it, but we'll set that aside for today. For those that don't know, I think you would be sort of the equivalent of Mike Morath here in Texas. But that's just, so for those that don't know, what is the Superintendent of Public Instruction for the state of Oklahoma? What do you do?
Yeah, let me give you the biggest difference between me and a Mike Morath in Texas is I'm an elected official. So I'm a statewide elected official. It's a constitutional office here in Oklahoma. So I oversee the school system. I oversee the State Department of Education and any policy directed at our public school system.
Okay. So, I guess Mike Morath is appointed. So you're elected by the people, but obviously schools and education here in Texas is such a huge talking point nowadays because of the Texas House is in session, and we've been trying to push for school choice for I don't know how many sessions. And are we there? Are we not there? What's it going to look like? We have no idea. But I know that Oklahoma does have school choice. And I think it's in the form of parental choice tax credits, if I'm not mistaken. I guess I wanted to ask you, sort of breaking down what's the school choice landscape there in Oklahoma?
Absolutely. And I was actually just recently in the Texas legislature talking to a lot of the members there to try to help get this across the finish line. You guys absolutely need to get that done. We got it done 2 years ago, and what we've seen is dramatic improvement. We have a refundable tax credit, so it really functions a lot like an ESA, meaning that the school gets the tax credit on the front end. So if you pick a private school, you're not paying tuition out of pocket and waiting for a tax credit. The school gets the refundable tax credit on the front end, so you get to go to school without paying out of pocket. So it's really been very effective here. Our homeschooling population has loved it. It's really grown a lot of homeschooling options as well. So we're seeing private schools, micro schools, homeschools have been able to emerge. And one of the things that you hear a lot in the school choice debate, but is a complete myth, is, oh, well, it's going to hurt your public schools, right? Well, guess what? It's going to make your public schools get better. In our first year of implementation, we told all of our F schools, hey, guys, if you don't get off this F list, your kids are going to leave. They're going to go to all these other options. We saw over 117 schools get off of our F list. We'd never had more than 40 get off the F list before. So that shows you that free market competition really does work to motivate them to get better.
So can you dive a little bit more into the details of that? How does it improve a public school? Is it really just because there's competition? Is it because the student to teacher ratio changes? Is it something else entirely? What's going on there?
Great question. Number one, it is the free market. I mean, you look at this and you say, how do you get schools to be more accountable? How do you get them to be more transparent? And of course, there's different ways that you can take a bite of that apple. But the biggest way to deal with that is by saying, parents, if you're not happy, take your kids somewhere else. And again, we began messaging even before our school choice tax credit went into play. We said it's going into effect next year. Schools, you might want to improve, because when we put out your test scores, when we show kind of where you guys rank, you're going to have a lot of folks leave. So it really does give you the ability to drive that message from taxpayers and parents to the school system to say, we've got to see improvement. For the first time, we're hearing, schools are doing exit surveys. Hey, if you're leaving, we want to know why, and we want to address it. And again, that's common sense in the free market and private business, but you haven't seen that in schools. And so what we've seen here is, schools are doing a lot more kind of work-based learning. They're doing a lot more individualized instruction. They're doing a lot more remediation when kids fall behind. We're seeing schools embrace merit pay, because guess what? They don't want to lose their good teachers, because they know probably the parents are going to follow that good teacher to whatever school they go to. So we've been able to see the free market at work here in the state of Oklahoma.
Yeah. So on the public, I know that, private schools obviously have a lot of leeway. I assume it's the same in Oklahoma, but they have a lot of leeway to specialize, and, maybe there's a tech private school or whatever, right? In the school choice model there in Oklahoma, does a public school, they have fewer students now. There's a lot more choice. Do they have the leeway, the freedom to specialize more in a certain area of education?
Absolutely. What we've done is we've tried to provide as much flexibility without sacrificing accountability for our public schools. So one of the things we did is, hey, we're giving you more opportunities at pathways towards graduation. So if you want to emphasize more of a trade-based learning in your school, you can. if you want to emphasize more of an aviation emphasis or more of an engineering emphasis, all the way through a K-12 system, we gave flexibility with our standards to say, here's how you meet the standard, but you can do it in a lot of ways. And that was in order to allow schools to do that. Again, where do you live? What's more unique to that part of the state? What do you see that you're hearing from your community? And so, one of our biggest school districts we're very proud of just started we identify kids in the early grades. What type of interest do you have when it comes to a job? What type of skills do you have? And we start aligning the curriculum as early as third and fourth grade to say, listen, we're going to sprinkle in some of the things we already know that you have an interest in to keep you motivated throughout your learning experience. And again, we've seen a lot of positive impact there from that.
Yeah. So, I mean, I kind of found it interesting that, you're a former teacher and now you're the state superintendent. It's not the stereotypical person that you would find supporting school choice. I wanted to get maybe a little bit more of your personal side. Why is it something that you support? And what do you think is the fundamental flaw on the other side's argument? I hear teachers and former teachers that are now state reps here in Texas all push against it. What makes your point of view different?
So I'll make it brief. But so I was a public school teacher out in rural Oklahoma, McAllister, Oklahoma. And I was our district's teacher of the year one year, and I was a finalist for the state teacher of the year. And as I went through this process, you're getting, you're going into rooms where you're presenting to business leaders and association leaders, the folks like that. And what I began to see was I would walk in and go, yeah, school choice makes sense. Yeah, merit pay makes sense. To me, it was common sense as a teacher of you want parents involved. You want parents to be able to drive the decision making of a school. And of course, that will make your cream rise to your top, not only districts, but teacher wise as well. And I noticed the business community were like on board with it. Your parent groups were on board with it. But your school association, your administrators, your teachers union, they hated it. They hated those type of ideas. And for me as a teacher, it made me really reflect. Like, well, why? I mean, I don't understand. I mean, to me, it's kind of common sense. But you begin to look at it from an understanding of the infrastructure of those associations have all grouped up, your school board association, your administrators association, your teachers union, to say, we want the status quo. We just want more money for the status quo. Because inside this status quo, we get a cut of every dollar going into the public schools. If teachers leave and go to private schools, if teachers leave and go to charter schools, we don't get as much of that money. And so when you start breaking it down like that, it makes a lot of sense of, individual teachers are hearing these lies, talking points from the teachers union daily. They get on their computer at the end of the day and it comes from a teacher they know and it says, hey, this is terrible. They're going to fire all the teachers with school choice. And they go, well, why? I don't want to be fired. Well, what's going on here? And it's just so ridiculous. But the teachers union, I will give them credit. They're very effective at their gaslighting and fear tactics.
Yeah, I want to talk about the teachers unions here in a little bit, but one common argument against school choice here in Texas is that, well, I guess there's two of them. One is that teachers would lose their jobs. And so you just sort of illustrated that sort of spreads online pretty easily. I get it. Teachers, if I was a teacher, I wouldn't want to lose my job either. But then I think about it as, well, there's still the same number of kids that need education. I feel like the job is still going to be there. It just may be somewhere else. Is that sort of how it works?
You nailed it, Brad. I mean, my argument to that is there's still the same amount of kids, so you're going to need the same amount of teachers. The question is, where are you going to teach? And do you want to teach in an environment where this is truly your only option? Or would you that's why I try to tell teachers, not only does school choice make schools compete for kids, it also makes them compete for teachers. When you ask parents, how do you identify the best school for your kids? One of the top things they say is, the quality of their teachers. Do they have really good teachers or not? So when you embrace the free market and school choice, schools will start saying, hey, we've got to go get a Miss Johnson in math. We've got to go get Mr. Smith teaching, science in our school, because we know that the parents will understand that their kids are getting a really great education. And so that's kind of the fear tactics that they drive of they'll fire you or whatever else. Honestly, it couldn't be further from the truth. What you're going to see is schools actually competing for higher quality candidates. Frankly, they'll start spending more on teacher salary and stop as much with administration. Brad, that's one of my biggest frustrations. You've seen it in Oklahoma, Texas, and across the country. You put more money in education, and guess what? They say they need more money for teachers. But when you give schools more money, guess where they spend it? Administration. They all go hire themselves another deputy superintendent, an assistant to the deputies. I mean, they just grow bureaucracy, constantly, instead of getting money to the classroom, school choice also further incentivizes them of, you think parents are like, hey, we need more bureaucrats in the schools. That's what we need. Well, of course not. They want higher quality of teacher, and that's what that places that type of incentive there for that as well.
Yeah, another major argument against it here in Texas, and I don't know this for sure, but I would imagine it was very similar in Oklahoma, that the rural, you know, school districts, it's the sort of the community hub of those rural areas. A lot of Republicans, conservatives, the last session pushed back against it because of that. They represented those areas, and I think Abbott and others primaried against them, and got some change here in the Texas House. What's happened to those rural districts in Oklahoma with school choice? Did the community fall apart? Was there were there new schools popping up and everyone lost their job? What happened?
Yeah, great question. And I'll even point to, we started showing our folks Arizona. Arizona's had ESAs for nearly 30 years, and they haven't had a single public school close. And so we were like, guys, this doesn't mean that all of a sudden your school's closed. What it means is, again, we do have a growth in homeschooling. Okay. We have a lot of folks out in the rural parts of the state that are like, hey, now with this tax credit, we might be able to teach our kids at home. We have seen a growth in private schools. We've seen some micro schools pop up in rural areas. But again, what we have seen is an increase in test scores. We have seen schools that were out in the rural areas of the state that were really struggling with graduation rates, with academic achievement, that have gotten better in the last 2 years. We haven't seen any of these rural schools that have shut down over this. We haven't seen teachers lose their jobs over this. What we have seen is now an incentive for those schools to improve, to get better. And again, more options for kids has been a great benefit. And, and you look at this and it's so funny to me, your school choice opponents, that they argue two things that really cannot be true at the same time. One is no one in a rural part of the state want school choice options, right? They tell you that nobody wants it. Then on the other hand, they go, well, if you have it, all the rural schools will shut down because all the kids will leave. It's like, okay, well, both of those two things can't be true at once, right? And so the reality is what will happen is you'll see more options, parents will be more empowered, and those rural schools will continue to improve and continue to be embedded in their communities. That's what's going to happen.
Yeah. So is Oklahoma at its final iteration of school choice? Is it developing? Is there pushes to make it go further, more universal school choice? Where are y'all in that process?
Thank you for that. Yeah, we've got to get rid of we have a ceiling of tax credits where when you hit a certain amount, it needs to be increased. Right now, we have an automatic kind of escalator, but we want that completely eliminated. Where again, as many families that want this, we don't want to cap that, and so we're fighting that right now. Also in Oklahoma, I'm about a month away from going up to D.C. before the U.S. Supreme Court. We authorized a Christian charter school here in Oklahoma, the first Christian charter school in the country. Because again, we want more options for parents. We want to protect religious liberty. If you're Christian and you want to start a school, we want you to start a school. Okay. And so, of course, we've been sued over that by every left-wing actor you can think of, your ACLUs and all those folks. And so we're headed to the U.S. Supreme Court. They're going to hear oral arguments here in April. But we're very excited that we think that's the next frontier. Religious charter schools. Again, let's open up all fronts of school choice so that parents can have more opportunities. So we're very excited about that. We've also, in the last 2 weeks, launched a new website where, again, when parents go on, they type in their address, they can see not only every public school where they live, they can see every private school. They can have the application for our vouchers, our tax credits. Again, we're trying to not only make these things available, but make sure that people can connect to them, make sure that they can choose them. So I think that's something that's always a fight, is to make sure that all families know what options are available to them and make sure that it's a smooth transition if that's what they choose to do.
Yeah. So how does Oklahoma do school finance? Here in Texas, it's through property taxes and the Robin Hood system. How does Oklahoma do it?
Yeah, very, very similar here. We collect local taxes. We then have a state portion that comes in, and depending on how much you take in locally, it's offset by the state revenue coming in. So again, it's very, very similar in that way. And one of the things we're pushing for this year is I'm supporting and pushing a bill that says 60% of school expenditures should be used on classroom expenses, right? Like teacher pay, resources for the kids, things like that. And it's amazing to me. It's like, there, of course, your woke administrators are fighting us on it. And I'm like, okay, something is fundamentally wrong when you've got all these districts that are spending less than half of their funds on learning, right? Like, I mean, what are we doing? Like, this isn't a massive jobs program to just hire as many bureaucrats as possible. This is about educating our kids. Yeah. And again, the problem isn't the money in education. It's how the money is being spent. And we have got to get away from allowing just these woke bureaucrats to continue to build out their fiefdoms by hiring more and more bureaucrats and get money to the classroom so the taxpayers are seeing a return on investment. I think that's really important.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier merit pay for teachers, and obviously that's something that's talked about all across the nation. Texas, Oklahoma are no exception. I rarely hear people put forth. They always say that teachers are not paid enough. That's something that I could agree with. My mother was a teacher, and would she have liked to be paid more? Sure. How much should they get paid is maybe a different question. And I think merit pay comes into play there. Do y'all do merit pay in Oklahoma? What does that look like?
We do. We do merit pay, and what we do is every district or individual teacher can opt into it. And what we do here is you are able to make. We have some teachers that make over $100,000, and what they do is they come in and prove via multiple ways. So it can be their test scores growth there. They can show quality by bringing in, and again, we do this. Other entities do this, where we come in and actually grade the teacher on their job performance, or they can develop kind of their own criteria for showing how they've improved student learning in their local district. So we really are going, hey, whether you're a math teacher, science teacher, art teacher, whatever you are, show us how you are top 10% in the state. Show us how you're improving student learning. And again, so our two biggest districts, Oklahoma City and Tulsa, they have really leaned into this for reading and math. And just, hey, who can improve student scores the most this year? Boom, you enter into the merit pay system and you get a yearly allotment for that. So again, I think it's so essential that we do this. I think every state should be doing it. We should have every teacher on these type of pathways to say, listen, you hit certain benchmarks, we pay you more. It works everywhere else. I get so tired of these arguments that they want to act like the free market somehow ceases to exist in a public school. I mean, that's absurd. So we've got to continue to embrace these free market principles. And you know what we've been able to do with that, Brad? We've been able to recruit a lot better teachers. We've been able to keep a lot better teachers because you're able to get, very high quality people who, hey, look, it's not all about the money, but you know what? Human nature, we respond to that, right? When you get paid more and people identify it and they say, look, you are doing a great job, we're going to continue to pay you more. It gives those teachers more of an incentive to stay in the classroom, not go become an administrator, not go into the private sector, but say, listen, we're going to pay for quality here. And if you do a great job, we'll pay you more.
It's interesting that it's an opt-in system for the teachers. I think that kind of makes sense. But I can't help but wonder what happens, a teacher meets the criteria for $100,000 or whatever the number is. And then the next year they miss the mark. Does their pay go down? Is there a grace period? How does that work?
Yeah, so no, what they do is they go on to, once they get accepted into it, they have the incentive for multiple years, and then they are put on kind of a fast track to reapply. So what happens is once you get in, it's easier for you to stay in the merit pay system. And so the criteria goes, not that the standard doesn't drop, but you're not required to do as much. Initially, you got to do multiple interviews, provide a lot of key data points. To stay on it, you've got to continue to show those data points. So they do have to continue to show improvement. They do have to continue to hit the mark because, again, we want to make sure that it is the highest quality individuals.
Yeah. And the teachers, I presume that the data shows that the teachers that enter into this, they're working harder. They not only do they want that money, they're probably a lot more passionate about, making sure the kids are succeeding.
Oh, absolutely. One of the things that we did, let me give you Tulsa, for example. It was our biggest district. It was one of our lowest performing 2 years ago. We went in, we fired the superintendent. She was awful. Brought in a new superintendent. She came in, fully embraced merit pay. She found the students that were performing the worst halfway through the year in reading. She then took all the best teachers according to their test scores in those elementary schools and had them go and work with those classrooms where the kids were furthest behind. So she took the best, she paid them more through our merit pay system, but also she moved them with the kids who needed the biggest help, support. And we were able to see dramatic improvement by those kids by the end of the year because, again, those were your highest quality teachers. Those were your teachers who were like, absolutely, sign me up. I'll go above and beyond. And then we utilize those teachers to help train those teachers that were struggling with those kids. So again, what we've continued to see is it helps you identify the best. It helps you incentivize the best. And again, at the end of the day, you see a dramatic improvement in student learning.
Yeah. I want to be respectful of your time. I wanted to ask you about the union dues before we go, though. I know some of the, it's not just local unions that are against this, but national unions. I think you were on Fox News talking about this recently. And one idea that's been thrown out is to stop the government from collecting those dues for the unions. And a lot of people in Texas say this is not the proper role of government. They shouldn't be collecting the dues and then paying it. It should be very optional. What does Oklahoma do in that case?
Yeah, look, so right now we're fighting against this. I believe absolutely the government should not be helping the union collect their union dues. There's no reason for that. And we see teachers all the time that say, "Hey, look, I didn't know I was getting dues taken from my paycheck. I did not know this was happening." So what has to happen is, again, teachers should only be opting in every year. It shouldn't be an automatic deduction. The government should not be helping our teachers unions collect their dues. And again, I think it's common sense. I'm glad to see Texas addressing this as well, but it should be all across the country to say, teachers unions, we're not going to go help you collect dues, because I'm telling you, they are one of the worst actors across the country. They've undermined our schools. They undermined the parental unit. They fight every parent choice program, every parent right program. You look at their national NEA, AFT, the nonsense that they push, critical race theory, DEI, transgenderism. It's the whole allotment. They have an extreme agenda for this country. We need to run them out of schools, put parents back in charge, and I think this is a very common sense measure to do that.
Yeah. Well, Ryan Walters, the Superintendent of Public Instruction for the state of Oklahoma, I really appreciate you taking the time. Is there a website or social media that you wanted to plug before you go?
Yeah, absolutely. Ryan Walters for Oklahoma.com. We try to keep regular updates there of what we're doing. Very active on Twitter. Ryan Walters, SUPT on Twitter. So Ryan Walters Superintendent on Twitter.com, or X now. Sorry, I always forget that. But yeah, I appreciate it. And thank you for having me on, Brad. Appreciate all that you're doing, and I really appreciate the opportunity to come on the show.
Awesome. Thank you, Mr. Walter. Have a good day.
Thank you.